Folks, eating disorders are real. This ain't just a white thing. It also impacts African Americans as well. And is often underrepresented, underreported, these eating disorders that take place in the Black community. Joining us right now is Dr. Rachel Goode. She's an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And Doc, glad to have you here. Anytime we talk about eating disorders, again, it normally has a white face. But the reality is, this impacts African Americans as well, especially African American women.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought that up, because we have been telling for years this has been a white woman's thing. And that has caused us to overlook, to not treat. As Black women, Black people, we don't know what eating disorders look like when we have them. Our doctors, when we go to get help, they don't know if we have an eating disorder. And so often they're ignoring it. It causes our type 2 diabetes. It's related to obesity. It's related to heart disease. Eating disorders affect us more than we realize.
And so in terms of someone who's watching, in terms of, how do we, look for, what are the signs? What are we looking for? Yeah. And again, we're seeing it's younger and younger. And one of the things that we're also seeing, the impact that social media is having on young women and young men earlier and earlier when it comes to these eating disorders.
Yeah. So there's several types, Roland, of eating disorders. And the one that we see showing up most among Black Americans is binge eating disorder. And so what happens if someone has a binge eating episode? We're common with overeating, right? We know what it feels like. We're at the dinner table, your food, your belt's too tight, you got to unbuckle your pants. But when we have a binge eating episode, it's like you can't stop eating even though you want to, right? So often people feel like a snowball. It's kind of rolling down a hill and it is just out of control. And so often, sometimes people will eat in secret. People feel shame. People feel like, there's just no hope. And often there's a stigma. Who are you going to tell? Who's going to, you can be hiding in plain sight because people don't know what to look for. Often in my studies, when I'm working with women, I'm usually having to educate them about this. And they are wondering, why am I not, being able to, accomplish my weight loss goals? Or why am I struggling with type 2 diabetes? And often, because people don't really assess for eating disorders, our physicians don't always feel comfortable assessing, people aren't always getting the tools that they need, right, to heal their relationship with food. To recognize that sometimes it's more than being that desire to be thin. In our community, we've seen it's racism, it's trauma, it's history of sexual abuse. For Black women, it's the strong Black woman syndrome, just feeling like you just have to just be strong and, take everything on. So it's complicated. It's really complicated.
Questions from my panel. Julian, you're first.
Sister, thank you for the work. It's so very important. I want to ask, I'll tell you a quick little story about a friend. I called her up and said, "What you doing?" She said, "Eat the cheesecake." I said, "Surely you mean a slice of cheesecake." She said, "No, I'm upset. I'm going to Costco. I'm going to eat the whole thing." How much of this binge eating is self-medication?
Oh, it's so much. I think especially for Black women, eating food has been one of our most culturally acceptable coping mechanisms. It's the way we take care of ourselves. It's the way, because we don't have permission to say that we've had enough, right? And so often our eating is the way that we're doing that. And so again, ultimately, we need to change the systemic conditions so Black women have the care that they need, so they don't have to feel like they have to cope with other, make up their own coping mechanisms. But food really has just been our way. It's inexpensive, right? You can get what you need quickly, and people really have used it to take care of themselves.
Makongo.
So, Dr. Goode, one of the questions that I have when you talk about this binge eating is I have a concern about access, right? We all know that on all levels, binge eating can be dangerous, but is there a difference when you're in, say, a wealthier neighborhood and you got access to food that has better ingredients from the restaurants, from the stores, more organic and so on and so forth? We know it's still an issue, but I'm assuming that are there deeper consequences when the food that you're binging is really unhealthy, coming from the fast food restaurants, high sugar that's in some of our local stores because we live in food deserts? Is there a discrepancy there?
Yeah, what we see, so when people have a binge eating episode, often it starts because what we see, it's related sometimes to poverty, right? People not having enough. And so we've seen, especially in individuals who are SNAP recipients, because, the allocations happen monthly, once a month. And so people usually have a period of time where they have a week or so where they don't have access to enough food. And so they are just trying to make it through the best they can. But once those benefits are restored, we see people our bodies want to keep us alive. So it's like, well, I don't know when the next time you're going to get something to eat. So I want to make sure you have what you need. And it is often those highly palatable, high sugary foods. Like there's often those things. It just makes it easier. Those chemicals in the food, those things just make it, sometimes they're created in a way to make us want them more. And so we're really fighting against a big uphill battle.
Avis?
So I'm really interested in sort of unpacking this focus on eating disorders as it relates to Black women, because I know typically when we hear about eating disorders, typically the first thing that comes to mind is maybe anorexia, then bulimia. And I really haven't heard a lot about binge eating. Do you think that that is the case because it is racialized? It's more likely to happen among African American women? And then on the flip side, what about the opposite end of eating disorders in which we normally hear about, with regards to the anorexia and bulimia? What sort of prevalence is that within the African American community, and how do we address sort of both sides of those coins?
Yeah, it's so important. So one of the challenges with eating disorders is that in order to get a diagnosis, you have to often go to a specialty eating disorder clinic.
It's 5 o'clock.
And you have to go to, maybe a therapist or a psychologist, someone who is trained. And so often for Black Americans, we get most of our treatment from primary care physicians. And so what we have seen is that the primary physicians don't often get the training. And because of that racialized piece, they are more likely, when they see us, they say, oh, well, this person's they don't have anorexia. They probably are more likely to have type 2 diabetes or obesity. And so we are getting talked to more about those things. But what we're realizing is that binge eating disorder, bulimia nervosa, another eating disorder, but this time where people may find a way to purge the food after they eat, both of those are the most common eating disorders in Black Americans. Anorexia nervosa, what we know right now is it is not as common because often people have to have a significantly low body weight, and that hasn't really been the case. We haven't seen that literature in samples of Black women. Not to say we don't struggle with, they call it atypical anorexia nervosa, where people may not have that low body weight, but still have that fear of eating. Because we are still in these, especially when we're in white spaces, we really just find ourselves often, trying to deal with that pressure, that we can't even often name. And it can manifest in us struggling with our body image, struggling with our weight.
All right. Dr. Goode, we appreciate you joining us, offering your perspective and advice, and hopefully folks have learned something from it, because this is an issue that has actually killed people and it destroys their bodies. And even if they do survive, it can lead to significant health problems later in life.
Yes. Yeah, we just have to continue to make us aware of all the things that affect Black people so that we can get our ultimate healing. So thanks for having me on.
Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much. All right, folks, back to our Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment. When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause
too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.